We are talking about some of the most fundamental things you need to understand if you're going to understand the Bible and if you're going to actually even understand life. And we started one with a basic truth, and that is the fact that there is one God and you're not Him. Now, I want to push on that truth a little bit harder and maybe even a little bit more painfully, because one big word that helps us understand what it means for God to be God is the word sovereign. Sovereign. This is a big theological word, but the sovereignty of God basically means that God has the complete, total, unforced, uninfluenced right to do with the things that He has created whatever He wants to do. That is just like an absolutely key concept. Jonathan Edwards put it like this. He says, the sovereignty of God supposes that He has the right, bold print, to dispose of all of His creatures according to His mere pleasure. And His right is absolute and it is independent. So you have stuff and you have the right to do with your stuff what you want, but not completely. Because there are laws. We say you have the right to do with your stuff what you want, but your right is not absolute. There are limits. So you can do what you want so long as it's not illegal. You aren't an independent person. You live in a country with rules. And even if you didn't, God has rules. So you can do what you want with your stuff as long as other people, as long as your country, and then as long as God says it's okay. But God's different. The sovereignty of God means that God has an absolute, unlimited, and independent right to do with His creatures whatever He wants. Nebuchadnezzar, a great king who thought he was pretty important until he was humbled by God, put it like this, Daniel chapter 4, verses 34 and 35. He says, His dominion is an everlasting dominion, and His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing, and He does according to His will among the hosts of the heavens and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay His hand or say to Him, what have you done? Maybe you can think of it like this. In this world, there are instruments and there are ends. So an end is a purpose, and an instrument is the tool that you use to accomplish that purpose. A pencil is an instrument. A letter is an end. I use the pencil as a tool to write the letter, which is the end or the purpose. But ultimately, there is really only one end. There is really only one purpose. And that is God, the glory of God. God is the single end of the universe. That's part of what it means for Him to be God. Everything else is a tool. Everything else is an instrument. Even you and even me. I once heard a man named Jonathan Gerstner say that someone told him they were never so close to not being a Christian as when they first came to understand the sovereignty of God, to which he responded, you actually were never so close to being a Christian. Because while as Christians we might struggle with the idea of the sovereignty of God, and we might have questions about the sovereignty of God, at the end of the day, it is difficult to know God and it is difficult to worship God until you recognize that He really is God. He is sovereign, and you are not.